Welcome to the 2025 Dialogue, a masterclass series by the HR Association of India. I am Neha Jagnani, and today's session explores a theme that strikes at the core of leadership and impact the power of purpose, leading with empathy, impact, and intention. To help us dive into this inspiring theme, we have with us Sumit Agarwal. Sumit Agarwal is a global DEI advisor to Fortune 500 companies and a trailblazer in diversity, equity, and inclusion. As the SDG ambassador for diversity and inclusion and a mentor of change with Niti Aayog, he brings a unique blend of empathy and innovation to his work. Known for using Lego, serious play design thinking, and visual facilitation tool like moth cards and liberating structures, Sumit has conducted 350 plus sessions worldwide. An UN certified inclusion expert and motivational speaker, he transforms complex DEI concepts into actionable strategies that inspires inclusive leadership and lasting organizational change. Sumit, thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure having you.
It's a pleasure. It's my pleasure to be
Thank you
here.
so much. So, to begin with, Sumit, my first question to you is what does leading with purpose truly mean to you, and how has your definition evolved over the years?
Well, there are a lot of leadership books. Fortunately or unfortunately for me, leadership started at a hospital, right? I was born with cerebral palsy, and nobody has written a book yet that how do you live with cerebral palsy. So for me, leadership is not something that I've learned out of books. It was a survival tactic, right? For me, leadership has been survival. So, when I started out, right, when I started out on my career, my thing was, how will people notice me? So I ran after achievement, after awards, after recognitions, like everybody does in the corporate career, right? One increment after the other, one company after the other, and then you also look at awards, you look at magazines, all of that. But somewhere in the journey, I began to realize that once you make your way up, right? Leadership is not about the tags or the titles that you have. It is more about the people you uplift along the way, the number of people you can help along the way. So if you look at the things that I do, right? If you look at Lego Serious Play or appreciative inquiry, I do a lot of appreciative inquiry sessions with Fortune 500 companies, right? Um, what we look at is how do you uplift people instead of looking at your own titles, own lenses, and everything else that you have, right? So my leadership journey has been one from personal resilience, right, to something of a collective resonance, right? Um, so you start with you, and then you move to, why just me? Why not help others along the way?
Sure.
As well as all the tools that I use, if you look at Lego, if you look at appreciative inquiry, all of that teaches you more about shared values. And it all starts with empathy at its core, right? So empathy matters the most, right?
Sure. Sure. Thank you so much. Beautifully put. I think I personally liked where you said that leadership is not about title, it's about uplifting others along the way. So thank you so much for beautifully putting it. My next question, Sumit, is in what ways can empathy become a strategic advantage rather than just an emotional trait in leadership?
See, when we look at empathy, right, a lot of people describe empathy as feeling somebody's pain, right? Feeling somebody else's pain, right? That's one of the most collective definitions that I've heard. I don't agree with the definition at all. If you look at empathy, right, it's not about understanding someone else's pain and what they have been through. It is more about designing, right? What do I mean by designing? when you understand their experiences, not just the pain. If you look at somebody's pain, it will put them into a victim lens that they have been through a lot of worse things in their life. They have also been through good things in their life. So you have to look at the collective experience, right? So that is empathy where you look at collective experiences. For example, design thinking starts with empathy, right? But then it moves to ideation and then it moves to co-creation. So if you look at empathy, right, when I do storytelling circles or campfire storytelling in circles, or when I do world cafe method where people are able to share their own stories and vulnerability, right? One thing is common is shared values, right? So you have to have safe spaces where people can psychologically express themselves without feeling very vulnerable. I think that should be the first trait where empathy becomes measurable, right? It becomes something which can transcend beyond the textbook, right? I, for me, empathy has been a, you know, master mantra to navigate through a complex world. Right? If you're able to understand what the other person is going through and what the other person wants, right, then you are able to design the world better. So for me, empathy is more about designing better solutions instead of just saying, "Oh, I understand what you've been through, and I wish I could do more, but I just understand what you've been through, and I'll listen to you." So that's just one part of it. Uh, but the other part has to be designing better solutions. That's the end goal of empathy, if you ask me.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much. Just to summarize, as you rightly said, it is about designing, looking at a collective experience and not just from a lens where you're victimizing a person. Again, the concept of shared values, creating those ecosystems where people feel safe enough to express themselves and show up. So, thank you so much for bringing it up. Moving on to the next question, Sumit, which is how do you ensure that purpose translates into measurable impact within your team or organization?
Most of the companies, when I ask them about purpose, they show me their mission and the vision statement. But I think purpose is something which transcends, right? It is not just the mission and the vision statement. It is not something which you can show me on a company wall, right? It is something which has to be internalized, and you have to start experiencing the purpose. If you experience the purpose, then I think you are able to do a good job. For example, when we look at um, setting purpose, right? For example, you want to set a purpose for your organization. You have to look at it from a lens where you have to say that, okay, I don't dictate the purpose, right? I often tell leaders, you don't set the purpose. Whenever you are not in the room, people will describe the company in XYZ manner, right? If I tell you what is HRAI, you might be able to tell me the mission, vision, values, and everything, right? That is how you describe it, not what is the written in the company document. That is the purpose. A purpose is something which is a shared intent of the valued stakeholders of a company or the followers of a leader, right?
Right. Right.
That can be the purpose, right?
Sure. Sure.
So when you look at purpose, what you have to do is you have to bring it into measurable goals. Now, how do you measure purpose, right? When you look at purpose, right, one of the indicators can be psychological indicators. Am I allowed to ask questions in this company? Am I feeling safe? Am I allowed to fail? Um, if if I'm taking on a XYZ project and it is not coming up as expected, am I allowed to have my own wall of failures in the company? I don't need to be the best employee of the month in the company, but can I have my own wall of failures and can I be recognized that, okay, even if I have failures, I won't be hung out in the town hall? Do I feel safe enough to express my own views? Right? So, behavioral traits plus psychological measurements is how you measure purpose, right? Am I, you know, uh, being appreciated enough? If you look at appreciative inquiry, right, what it does, it tells people to focus on the strengths, right? For example, you're designing a DEI program for a Fortune 500 company, XYZ, right? Why can't we not focus on what's not working for us, but focus on the moments of excellence? Now, what do I mean by moments of excellence? Moments of excellence is something which has already worked before. I've already had a person with a disability. I've already had somebody from the transgender community. What has worked for them? Right? And can we scale it? Can we scale it? For example, I have a retail store in 47 locations. Can I scale it across India? Is it scalable? Is the moments of excellence, can it be standardized into a SOP, right? So that is how you define and measure purpose.
Beautifully said. Sumit, a purpose is not in the mission or vision statement. It is how you create that ecosystem. It's a shared value. It is not dictated by a leader. There should be measurable goals and a culmination of psychological safety and behavioral trait. It makes the purpose more meaningful and shared. So thank you so much for that. Moving on to the next question, Sumit, which is what practices or habits help you stay grounded in intentions, especially during the time of uncertainty or change?
See, everybody says that we are in a VUCA world, right? And everybody is fed up of that acronym by now, that we are living in a volatile, uncertain, complex world. It is what it is. You don't have to make it so dark and gloomy, right? Uh, that being said, again, for me, what has worked is one is reflection for me, right? I reflect a lot on what is the next thing that I'm going to do, what I have done till now. Because a lot of people, in the corporate world, they are always busy comparing. They're like, few days back, one of my friends called me up. Arey, one of our friends have got around 50 LPA package, and I'm still stuck at 35. I was thinking, should I switch my job? Right? We are always so busy comparing in the world of Instagram and Facebook and especially LinkedIn, being a LinkedIn topper, I'm saying this. um, People look at it from a very comparison lens, right? Oh my God, he's updating his profile so much, he's doing so many corporate parties, so many networking. What am I doing with my life, right? So reflection is very important where you can celebrate your small wins, right? Not just not just what are you going to do next, but what you have done by now, right? And a 10-year-old Sumit would be probably very proud of what the 34-year-old Sumit has achieved by now, right? So that is something you should look at when you are reflecting. You should look at whether the 10-year-old or 15-year-old Neha who wanted to become an astronaut, probably an astronaut or a scientist or HR manager or a Fortune 500 company executive. Uh, is that kid proud of who you have become right now? Right? So that is another way of looking at it. The second way is you have to look at connecting with people at a very deeper level. I have attended so many networking events, and trust me, by the end of the event, I get around hundreds of visiting cards. I just come home, I just put them in in the corner, and it stays there. I want somebody to come and talk to me for half an hour and, you know, 1 or 45 minutes on different other things, on their interests, their hobbies, who they are as a person. I mean, you might be selling the same product or service. What interests me is the person itself, right? That is more important than the service or the product itself, right? So connect with people on a deeper level. Third is design from purpose. When I say design from purpose, what do I mean by design from purpose? A lot of times people are like, why me? Why has this happened to me? Why am I the one who's disabled, and why is not the other person or my neighbor does not have a disability? Right? Don't think from that angle. When something happens with me, maybe in the times of uncertainty, what I look at is, what are the lessons I can learn from this, and how do I navigate this, right? You always have to look at it from the angle of a lesson, right? And fourth is you always have to have uh, appreciative check-ins with yourself, right? Am I feeling all right? What do I want to do? Okay, it's okay if I am able to do nothing productive for 2 3 days, and if I just run off to Goa and go into scuba diving or use a jet ski, right? That's perfectly fine. A lot of people feel guilty that in the corporate world I'm taking a break and I have so much of backlog and whatnot, and I might be fired from my job and all of that. But I think it's completely fine if you take a time off and rediscover yourself and why are you doing it, right? You have to remember, why did you get into a job in the first place? It is not just for doing the job, right? You have to find your own why. So when we look at appreciative inquiry or Lego serious play, when you build models with Lego, it will actually allow your hands to build without thought, right? Because hand movements are 80% unconscious, right? So when you build models, that comes, that shows. So that is something which you'll have to find for yourself. So reflection, connection, designing from purpose, and then again you'll have to discover your whys, and then again there's something called service, where you give back to the community, where you are able to mentor somebody, where you are able to get mentored by somebody, where you are able to help out somebody who's looking for a job. This is not something which you do professionally. You do it because you do it without expecting anything in return, right? Because in this world, there are a lot of times people will remind you of the favors that they have done for you, right? So if you do it in that way, that won't help you. You just do it and forget it, right? So that all of this helps you navigate uncertainty.
Oh, thank you so much. Very thought-provoking indeed. Very fundamental but very crucial point, Sumit. And it can make a lot of difference in anybody's life. Starting with reflection, what is next, what has been done, and celebrating those small wins, as you rightly said, makes all the difference. Connecting with people at a deeper level. Then there is designing from purpose. What lessons is it that you have learned from others? Appreciative check-ins, and last but not the least, service. It connects us to the point that you had mentioned earlier, which is uplifting others. It gives you a sense of purpose. So thank you so much. This brings us to the last question for today, Sumit, which is how can leaders inspire others to discover and live with their own sense of purpose at work?
Um, Purpose cannot be discovered. Purpose must be elicited from within, right? It it is not something which is to be discovered. If you look at the things that I do empathy mapping, I do hero's journey, right? Um, so I do hero's journey, I do Lego serious play, yeah, I do appreciative inquiry. All of this has something in common, that is shared values, right? If you look at shared values, what do I mean by shared values? You have to find what drives people, right? Your purpose cannot be my purpose. Even if I'm working in XYZ, if I'm working in Microsoft, right? The purpose of the current CEO of Microsoft cannot be my purpose, right? The purpose of Jeff Bezos cannot be the purpose of any employee who's working in Amazon, right? You don't need to align purpose. I've seen lot of times the CEOs come to me, CHROs come to me, Sumit, our employees are not aligned. Like, what do you mean by they're not aligned? Um, बचपन में क्या होता था when I was in school, teachers used to be like, stand in a row, align yourself for the school prayer, right? And then kids used to be like, stand like this and join hands and pray, right, for the prayer. So these are employees, these are not school kids. You can't align them, right? They have to find their own purpose and then find a shared purpose, right, with the company. I don't need to align myself with the company. I need to see which is my purpose. I need to see how my purpose fits to, no, not just fits. Do I have something that I can share with the company? Right? Does it value? Does it bring value to the company and does it bring value to me? I'm not aligning myself for 100% to the company, right? So, so coming back to your question again, leaders today are people who have to understand that their voice is not the only voice in the room, right?
Right.
They can't just set an agenda and expect everybody to follow through it, right? Instead of looking at employees from a angle where we say that what is broken and why are we failing so much? Why don't we look at it from an angle where we say that what's working for us and how can we scale it and how do we support that and create a culture of trust, right?
Sure.
Because empathy can create a culture of trust faster than strategy any day, right? Any day, right?
Sure.
So if you want to crack the culture code, if I might say it, there are a lot of aspects to it, right? Pride, camaraderie, trust, respect, and fairness, all of this Is values inculcated where I work in Great Place to Work? These are parameters set for GPTW where we evaluate companies, right? And one thing I have seen is whether it's BSFI or it's technology or it's finance, a lot of companies are now struggling to work with Gen Zs, right? Because they're giving a lot of designations, right? And now they want me to do all the companies want me to do generational diversity workshops to align the generation gap and divide so that Gen Z stay loyal to the companies for a longer period of time. But again, the main problem is not alignment. The main problem is you can't lead from the top anymore. You have to lead from the center. And when I say lead from the center, it becomes a human centered approach, right? It does not stay a company's purpose centered approach. It becomes a human centered approach where there's a collective vision for people to share, where one person is not setting the agenda, but everybody is, right? And that's how you drive collective leadership. And that's the need of the hour.
So, thank you so much, Sumit. So many pertinent points there. Shared value, therefore, the center of this answer that you have, insights that you have shared. Very rightly said that organizations want their people to be aligned, but the truth is that it's the people who will have to see where they fit in, see the shared value between the organization and themselves. So thank you so much. And another wonderful takeaway from this answer was that empathy creates the culture of trust, and strategy cannot do that. So thank you so much for putting it together and sharing your insights. You have actually reminded us that true leadership begins when purpose becomes action and empathy becomes the way of leading. So thank you so much for today's session.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you.